Hey everyone, welcome to this video. We're gonna build a PC today. Help me get sponsored by Dunkin'. I literally drink this every day. Dunkin', if you're watching this, please sponsor me. Would you not classify yourself as tech savvy? But do you think MacBooks are too expensive? Well, don't worry, because in this video we're gonna build a full PC from scratch and you're gonna see how easy it is and how much cheaper it is than its alternatives. First, let's get started with the parts. This is a motherboard. Motherboard is where all the parts will be plugged into, so they'll be able to communicate with one another. So this is a very important part. Now this houses everything, so there's two types. There's AMD or Intel. So depending on what processor you go to, you have to buy the right motherboard. I'm using a Ryzen, so this is a Ryzen motherboard. The motherboard we would decide to go with is A320M-A PRO by MSI. So again, this is an AMD motherboard, and we decided to go with this because it's first generation, second generation, and third generation compatible, which makes it future-proof. Now there is only 2 DDR4 slots, which is whatever, but I think 16 gigabytes of RAM is enough, which we'll all talk about. So this is a processor. A processor is a brain of the computer, so it processes all the information, and the processor we decided to go with today is Ryzen 5 1600, which is a first generation, but for the budget it fit well, and it runs very, very well, as you will see. So this is the RAM. RAM is like how many apps you can run at once. I kind of consider it like a muscle of the computer. So this is important, and AMD processor actually works really well with fast RAM. So the RAM we decided to go with is the Corsair Vengeance at 3200 megahertz. So this is an important part as well. Next is a graphics card. Graphics card processes all the graphic information that is getting sent to your monitor, so this is a really important part for, you know, gamers and video editors and things like that. The part we decided to go with is the RX580 by Redragon. This is really good card in my opinion for budget builds. It runs at 8 gigabytes. This is the Sapphire Plus version, so it runs cool, and this has been my favorite for so long. The next part would be the power supply. The power supply obviously powers the computer, so these parts all need energy. This will be what gives them the energy. So we decided to go with 550 watts, which will be enough to power all these things and leave room for future upgrades. Last but not least, we decided to go with the silicon Power SSD. You know, SSDs are so important nowadays over hard drives. These are so much faster for loading all your files and all your game files. So we decided to go with the 500 gigabyte, and this has been my favorite for budget builds as well because it's so much cheaper for how well it performs. So yeah, this will all be going into this case. We decided to go with the MasterBox MB311LA RGB. It comes with 2 RGB fans, and I think it's a great case for the budget. So yeah, so everything I've been explaining is all the parts that you need to get a PC running and started. And without the monitor and keyboard, this PC will run for about... Now this is a relative price. PC prices always fluctuate, and during quarantine this was the best that I can do for a future-proof computer. Now we have extra fans, Wi-Fi card, Bluetooth card, keyboard, and the monitor that we decided to go with is the LG LED monitor. This is a 2 millisecond monitor, so I thought this would be good. And with the monitor and all these accessories, it'll go for... And all the parts will be listed in the description so you can see for yourself. Some of these are sold out because of quarantine, but I'm sure they'll come back. And obviously you can go with other parts depending on your budget. So I don't have a cameraman, so this guy will be my cameraman for today. He'll be looking at the close-up view. So let's get started with the motherboard. So when you open up the motherboard box, you're going to be greeted with an I/O shield, which will be important to go in the case. Instructions and cables for your data, and then the motherboard itself. Now it's important that you ground yourself before you start any of this by touching grounded metal, which I already did. And what I like to do is to just close the case back up, and then you put the motherboard on top. Again, make sure you grounded yourself, and you want to handle this carefully by grabbing it by the edges and then just placing it on top of the motherboard box that it came with. And that is how you get started. So the first thing we're going to install is the CPU. The CPU, again, is the brain of the motherboard. And what's cool about the AMD motherboard is that they come with a cooler, so that you don't need to buy an external one. Obviously, you can get a cool AIO water cooling for better performance, but I think for what we have, this is more than enough. So CPU will come like this, and it's pretty simple. First thing you're going to want to do is you want to unscrew these things. These are guards that just come, so just hold it and then unscrew them. And what you want to do is you want to carefully lift this pin up. What you're going to see on the CPU is that there is this triangle. This triangle indicates how you're going to line it up on the motherboard, and on the motherboard you'll see a triangle right there. That is to indicate how you're going to place it on the motherboard, and you don't want to press it in, but just kind of gently fit it in there, and it goes right in. And then you want to press this lever down until it clicks, and you're good. That is how a CPU is placed. The next thing you're going to want to do is grab the CPU fan, and what AMD does cool is they already apply the thermal paste in there. So all you want to do is just kind of line up the AMD logo with the direction that you're going to want it to go. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to screw it in, but not all in at once. But you're going to want to do it diagonally so all the sides just kind of get put in correctly. And then what you're going to want to do is take the CPU fan wire and then find where it says CPU fan on your motherboard, and then you're just going to want to plug it in. Now these pins are a little bit intimidating, but they're not. You just plug it in and you're good to go. And then you kind of just want to like make it look good. So now that the CPU is done, next thing we're going to want to install is the RAM. Now, as I mentioned, this motherboard is a DDR4 RAM. Now, some Facebook Market sellers and stuff still sell DDR3 RAM, so make sure you're buying a DDR4 motherboard and a DDR4 RAM. So these are actually extremely easy to install, but I see that this is where most people mess up because they don't want to mess it up and they don't want to press it hard enough, and it's not clicked in all the way, and then people message me saying, hey Eric, like, my PC is not starting. So what you want to do is you want to click these back. Some motherboards only this side click back, but this motherboard clicks back on both sides. And now when you look at the RAM, you're going to see that there's a long DIMM and then a short DIMM. And you want to see which side the long DIMM goes and then which side the short DIMM goes. And then you just want to plug it in and then just push it in until you hear that click on both sides. And then you want to do that for the second RAM as well. And now, some motherboards have 4 DIMM slots, as I mentioned, which is great. I decided to go with a 16 gigabytes, so I think 2 DIMM slot was more than enough. But if you do have 4 DIMM slots, what you want to do is you want to do no RAM, RAM, no RAM, RAM, or RAM, no RAM, RAM, no RAM, depending on your motherboard, to get its full functionality. That was it for the RAM. What a nice case. So this is the case, and it has a tempered glass panel, so you want to just kind of unscrew this. So I really appreciate the tempered glass over the acrylic, so I recommend going tempered glass most of the time. You want to unscrew the back as well and open up everything while you start installing. This case does come with a filter that you just put on top. I think they just place it there so you don't lose it as you're unboxing it, so that's kind of nice. All the screws and stuff are going to be here, the RGB controller for this one, and all the wires. This is the most annoying part, but today we're going to teach you how to do this. Where did that fall off from? So we've actually got some extra fans because this case comes with 2 fans in the front, but you kind of want one in the back and also maybe on top. So this is a 3-pack by InWin Sirius loop, and I thought it would be a great addition with the RGB already built into this case. Depending on how many fans you have, it's going to be different, so I'm just going to install mine. But what you want to make sure when you install your own fans is that the cable management is good. So you want to make sure that maybe it's not facing outwards like this. Maybe you want it to go inside and out the back, so things like that. So you want to make sure your cable management is always good. And again, it's going to be different for everyone, so we're going to skip through this part. Alright, so we got the fans installed, and now we're going to install the motherboard inside the case. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to get the I/O shield, which comes with your motherboard, and then you're going to find in the back of the case there's like a rectangle that fits perfectly. And what you're going to want to do is just put it in and kind of snug it in there until it clicks. As you can see, it popped in, and then now it's kind of steady in there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the motherboard and then see that there are standoff screws that are already built into this case. Not every case is going to have the standoff screws built in, so they're going to give you a screw to put it in, and those are more dynamic, but this is a micro ATX case, which this is a micro ATX motherboard, so it's going to fit perfectly. So you're going to want to gently take your motherboard, again holding it by the edges, and then kind of line it up with the I/O shield, and then make sure that the things line up and go in. Perfect. So you're gonna want to just kind of place it gently until the I/O shield and the motherboard lines up perfectly, and then you're gonna want to screw it in at the mounting points that you're gonna find the screws that was provided for you. Alright, now that we got the motherboard installed, what we're going to work with is all the cables. We're going to hold off on the GPU because it covers a lot of the motherboard pins. So what we're going to do is install our power supply. Now when you open the power supply, it's going to be intimidating. It's going to have a lot of wires, but don't worry, these are going to be really comprehensive, so let's get started. So this case does come with like a hard drive mounting thing, but I'm actually going to unscrew it because there's a SSD holder right there, and we're not going to install any more hard drives, so this will be just good for cable management. So just take that right out, place it somewhere else, and the power supply will go here, so this will be all room for cable to just sit in. So for this case, what we're going to do is we're going to actually put the power supply right through here. And then you're going to want the fan actually facing downwards, so all the dust and stuff will just go downwards. And as I mentioned, the cables just fit nice and snug here. And then once you got it nice and snug in there, you're going to want to just screw it in with the given screws at the right mounting points that you'll see as you line it up. Next, we're going to install the hard drive, or in this case, the SSD. It just pops open like that, and the SSD is going to be mounted here on the back, depending on your case. So how it's going to be done is your case are going to give you these little rubber things that you're going to be able to just put onto your SSD with the screws that they give you. And then you're just going to take it right there, put the feet in, and just find these 4 holes right here, and then just kind of plug them in. Now make sure you know which direction it's going to go. The cables are probably going to want to go downwards. I might even just take the SATA cable that they give you, these. So I'm going to plug in the cable beforehand. This is the SATA data cable. So I'm going to plug this in, and then maybe I even want to plug this in, which SATA cable is coming from your power supply. So take the power supply, SATA cable, it has a little L here thin, and then just plug that in as well, so you don't have to worry about it. And then what you're going to want to do is just make sure that these line up to these holes, make sure the cables are nicely managed, and then just kind of plug it in. Alright, so let's talk wires. Excuse this light, but I need to shine the light into the PC, so I'm going to go ahead handheld on this one. So let's get started with like the wires that come with the case. So these are all labeled. These are the most annoying ones we'll talk about. This one that says HD audio, and this one is a USB 3.0. So basically these make this part of the case all work. The power button, audio, and like the USBs. So let's get started with the annoying ones and just get it over with. So this is for your power button. Power, HDD, LED, and reset and stuff like that. And those will go to the JFP part of the motherboard. If the GPU was in here, this would be like covered and annoying, which is why we're going to install the GPU last. So for this one, I'm going to put a diagram on the screen of how this gets plugged in. So those are nice and snug in there now. I recommend you look at your own motherboard instructions. Just look at the diagram for each motherboard. So the next HDD audio. The HDD audio will be labeled audio. Well, as you can see, there's one less pin right there. So you kind of line that up with the pins here that says HD audio, and then just plug it right in. And then lastly, we got the USB 3.0. There's a nub right here on the cable, as you can see, and there's a nub right there. So find the USB, and then make sure not to bend any pins. Just be careful, and then plug it right in. I'm gonna do it and show you so I don't bend my pins. So on the other side, what you're going to have is the SATA data cable that you transfer through the holes. And then there's going to be these 4 slots, maybe more depending on your motherboard. But you can choose any one, and then you're going to line it up and make sure that it looks nice. So it is nice and snug in there now. So those are the case wires, and that is complete. Next, what we're going to do is take this 24 pin, which is powering the motherboard, and just kind of line it up and then plug it into the 24-pin slot, as you can see right there. Next, you're going to take the CPU labeled cable. It's labeled right there, CPU, and then find that 4-pin, sometimes 8-pin, and then plug it right in with the one that matches the squares. For the GPU, you're going to find a PCIe cable. In my case, there's 8. Sometimes you're going to have more. You're going to want to pinch this cable together and then plug it in before you put the GPU in there for the ease. And what you're going to want to do is pop these things off. And next, you're going to take your GPU and carefully line it up with the DDR5 slot that I mentioned earlier. And then just line it up with where the screws go, and then it'll click in place like that. Perfect. Now what you're going to want to do is, again, just kind of screw the GPU in where the GPU hole mounts are. Some cases are outside, some cases are inside. In this case, it's inside, and make sure it's securely placed. And once you plug it in, it'll look like that. So now with the GPU installed, we're ready to try starting up the computer to the BIOS. So the monitor we're going to be using again is LG. This is a 2 millisecond response time. So for the budget, that's great for gamers. The keyboard and mouse we're going to be using is a Redragon K552 RGBA. It has a combo. I thought it would be nice for budget gaming builds. So yeah. And the moment of truth, I can't see this. I have to see it from the camera. Oh, the power supply. Make sure it's on. Switch. Go. Ooh. Now if we the monitor wasn't plugged in all the way. Hey, let's try it one more time. Ooh, these are fully controllable, by the way. Ooh, there we go. Now for Windows installation, you're going to be able to find tons of video on how to make a USB bootable drive. So I'm going to skip that, just find that on YouTube and then get on with it. And then, yeah, that's it for the build video. Make sure you close up the case nicely, and we're going to run the benchmark now. So thank you guys for watching. Alright, so for settings, we're going to just run everything at Epic to test and unlimited FPS. The mouse definitely feel pretty good for what they are. I forget if they're red or blue switches alternative, but it sounds like they're blue switch alternative. It seems at Epic everything's running around 78, 70, yeah. So we got high settings, everything for CSGO and arms race, and it seems we're gonna run it at about 170, 200 FPS. High setting everything, and when you look at it, it's gonna be 84-ish FPS. 84, 85, you're getting around there at high settings. So lastly, we're gonna run some Valorant. Valorant, like the Vanguard thing, actually keeps you from running GPU and CPU temperature, which is weird, but let's see. So for video settings, we're at high everything. Ooh. For video settings, we're at high everything, and we're running about 150, 160 FPS, it seems. Ooh. Alright, so that's it for the benchmarks of this computer. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was not like a full comprehensive review, but for a budget build, we're just showing how these games will run. So yep, that was it for our computer build. I hope the build process didn't seem too hard and that you guys gained something out of it. So thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, comment.